Okay, so here's a video. I wanted to go through that last exercise in the week 7 activities where you're putting multiple waves together into one. Now this exercise it's a bit of a slog to do, and I hope that you find some value in that. I think it is helpful to really get down and dirty and understand how waves can be added together like that. Uh, so once you've done that, I'd like you to this video is sort of to look a little bit deeper. So this is the activity, right? You've got the four waves, and you pick two of them. I've added letters here in the current version to make it a little bit easier to tell um, to to identify them. So you're adding, A and B, or A and C, or C and D. There's actually six different combinations there. And what we're going to do here, I'm going to show you behind the curtain a little bit. We're going to go into Praat, and I've got the link in the description uh, of this video. And Praat, as I've mentioned before, is a piece of software that phoneticians use a lot to do different types of analysis. And it has this scripting or like internal programming function you can use to generate um, stuff. So that's what we're going to use. Don't worry, you don't have to know programming. You just have to be able to run a script, and I'll show you exactly how. So you'll see linked with this assignment, these exercises, there's a script, and I've called it WK for week 7 wave generator dot Praat, P-R-A-A-T. So that's the file, and so you download that, and here I have my folder that has a bunch of the activities, and I have that Praat file in that folder. I have Praat open here, and I'm just going to go open, read from a file, and I've actually already navigated to that folder. Here's that Praat file. Because it has that dot Praat at the end, Praat knows that that's a script. I know that popped up on the wrong window. This is the script. And if you're really into programming, you can read through this. It's a pretty straightforward um, syntax, uh, and if not, that's okay because you don't even need to do that. Basically, what this does is it creates a bunch of sine waves from formulas. So each of the four waves that you see in that exercise have properties like phase, amplitude, and frequency, and those can be encoded. And then it also creates some waves by adding those together. And because there's only six combinations, I just gave, you see in the file, there's the four, uh, the four basic sine waves, and then commands for the six combined waves. And all you really need to do is go up to the run menu here and hit run. And it doesn't take any time at all. And in Praat now we have 10 objects, the four basic sine waves and the six combined waves. So I can play the sine waves. The first one, okay, they're all just tones. Second one sounds exactly the same. So there's already something to notice there about the frequencies of those first two sine waves. So if you look at them, what is different about them and what's the same? Here's a third sine wave. So you can hear that it's different pitch. And that one. Now remember, they also have different amplitudes. One thing to keep in mind when you're listening is that if something has a higher frequency, if it has the same amplitude, then it's going to sound louder because what our ears hear as loudness isn't just how much the pressure changes, but also kind of how much energy there is. And so if it's going back and forth twice as often, for example, there's kind of twice as much energy as a wave that has a slower frequency, a lower frequency. And so higher frequency waves sound louder at the same amplitude if you're just measuring in terms of pressure. So that's something to keep in mind when you're listening to these. And then we can listen to the combination waves. So if we have wave A added to wave B, we get this combined wave. Sounds very similar, doesn't it? Uh, Look at the sample answers if you're not sure why that's happening, or you can think about it yourself. Maybe try adding those two waves together and look at the properties of the wave. When you have the waveform, you can read off certain of the properties. Um, Whereas adding the sine wave A and C, that's these two, gives us this. So that you can hear that it's a bit more complex. And so on. So I'm not going to go through all of the examples here, but what I've been doing, here I'll show you in the screen. I can just select one thing here and hit the play button to the side, and that's how I hear it. I can select a couple, play them side by side, or select them together just by dragging over both of them, or hitting one and then hitting Control and selecting another one, and it plays them in sequence. I could even play them in sequence with the combination wave. Okay, so that's as complex as we're going to get right now with Praat. Of course, the other thing you can do, I suppose, is you can go into that composite wave. Let's go to A and C and hit the View and Edit. And oh, this is popping in a different window. I'll just drag it across, maximize it. And what Pratt automatically gives us is a waveform and a spectrogram of the whole sound. Now, we can't see a lot of detail. It varies too quickly, but I'm going to say select, and I'm just going to enter a 6 millisecond window because that's the window in the exercise. And you see it selected this short window, and then I can go, these buttons along the bottom, along the bottom left are actually selection. I can zoom in, zoom out, and the SEL, that's zoom to whatever you've selected. So here's my selection. So if your combination of waves A and C looks a bit like this, that's good. That's what the computer is calculating. And I can zoom out a little bit, and we can start to see that there's a repetition happening here. There's a cycle. That cycle repeats and repeats, and it repeats backwards, right? So you can start to see the patterns. In the exercise on the page, I just put 6 milliseconds, and in fact, some of these combined waves repeat over a longer window. So it might be helpful to look in Pratt at them to get a deeper idea of what's going on. But that's entirely up to you. You're not going to be tested on Pratt. You'll just, I think, if you try it out, you will find that it's useful. Another thing you can see in Pratt here, this spectrogram isn't very useful as it is. It's just this sort of blobby thing at the bottom. But if we go under spectrum and change the settings, first of all, we don't need to see up to 5,000 hertz because we don't have a lot of high frequency energy. If it was speech, we would like that, but we're not dealing with speech just yet. So up to 1,000, that's still very blobby, but we know that we can make the window longer. This is right now 5 milliseconds. What if we make it 50 milliseconds? Sorry, I'm looking at the spectrogram settings window here and apply that. Well, now we're getting somewhere. Now we have two distinct bars. They're still very broad. Let's make it 100 milliseconds, which is going to be almost useful for any kind of speech, but it's pretty useful here. With those settings, if I click on the middle of one of these bars, 500 hertz, 400 hertz. What does that have to do? You can read, you might not be able to see in your video, but this little red number here, and it's hard to get exactly in the middle, but you can see that it's very close to the round number. That tells you what the frequency is at the point that you've clicked. Okay, and there's various other things that you can read out of the Praat readout if you play around with it. It is a very eccentric piece of software. It doesn't do things in an intuitive way, but what it does very well in terms of phonetic analysis. And we'll be looking at a little bit more in coming weeks here. But hope that's helpful. There you go.